Hi, welcome to the channel. So, I think I figured out the dark forest theory. What is the dark forest theory? Well, it's not necessarily that we are alone in the universe, but it could be that others are very much like us. So, a hunter alone in the forest knows that there might be other hunters and all sorts of creatures there. And so attacking first might be the difference between life and death. If we assume that others are like us, then likely their planets had predators and survival challenges, much like the early humans. And survival instincts developed, their kind of version of survival of the fittest type evolution. So the theory suggests that there are more civilizations, but they are hiding from each other out of the fear of mutual destruction. They might just think that it's better to stay quiet because those who didn't have been destroyed. They don't know the capabilities of other civilizations, or how hostile they are, or how hostile they might perceive them. A small bit of progress can make a massive difference. Take a caveman and a medieval knight. A caveman doesn't think of himself as hostile, but if he comes across a medieval knight, he might attack out of fear because he's seeing this thing he's never seen before, and it has, a shiny stick that's very pointy. And he's like, well, I need to kill him before he guts me like a fish. To the caveman, that's survival. To you and me, that's hostile. Because we've evolved past that. We don't randomly attack people in the street because we think they're going to attack us first. Now let's shift to the knight's perspective. Let's assume that he had won. So now, to him, cavemen are hostile because he had been attacked for no reason in his mind. You can't communicate or reason with a caveman. So the knight then gets his army and slaughters all the cavemen. And again, to you and me, that's brutal. They have weapons that the caveman can't compete with. It's not a fair fight. Not that it would be okay if it was, but that just makes it all the worse. But to the knight, he is protecting his kingdom because he's now thinking, what if a child wanders into the forest and comes across these people? What if they band together and attack a village full of mothers and children that are unable to defend themselves? So would we now see a medieval army as hostile? Yeah, probably. They would be very confused by our world and would likely try to fight some of us. Could they defeat us, though? Hell no. One missile and they're gone. But is that an appropriate thing to do? No, it isn't. But this is where perspective comes in, because an army would be a lot easier to communicate with than a caveman would. And we might actually accomplish something through conversation, so it's a little bit easier for us to sit on our high horse. If there are civilizations that are kind of past these types of instincts and do form relations with others, then they might also be very picky about who they hang out with. So think about it in a universal sense, right? Even take, for example, what's happening with Russia and Ukraine right now. For a civilization like that, seeing that might be equivalent to you walking past me down the street and suddenly seeing me punch myself in the face. You don't know what reason I had to do that, but you're likely not sticking around to find out because that was weird, unnecessary, and quite self-destructive. And so a more evolved civilization might have a similar mindset to that, where they're a bit like, yeah, maybe we should avoid these guys for a while because they're acting like the ancient Martians before they got wiped out by the Uranians. I know. Okay, I know how it sounds, but it's called an exaggeration to make a point. Point being that someone more evolved than us might see us as a bit of a liability, kind of like we would see a caveman or, a medieval knight. And are they really wrong in the grand scheme of things? Let's say it's not an army. What if it's aliens and they suddenly land on Earth? They've decided they want to meet us, say hi, but we can't communicate with them because we don't have a common language. We don't know what they want. We would probably freak out a little bit. Military would definitely be involved. They'd probably throw anything they possibly could at them. I'm not saying they would attack straight away, but they might still end up seeing us as hostile because you'd probably have all these people with guns and all different types of weaponry. And, when you come to visit someone, you don't necessarily expect them to have a tank pointed at you. And so in their minds, that might be very hostile. Whereas we might see it as defending our home. And if we did end up attacking them, well, that just makes it all the worse, doesn't it? Because then we're just proving that we are hostile and kind of giving them an excuse to attack us. But we're just kind of scared, like a bear in the woods, and we're defending our territory. They might choose to watch us from afar, kind of like you would a stranger's child if they were doing something really silly and you were afraid they might hurt themselves, but you wouldn't necessarily want to insert yourself into that situation unless it was absolutely necessary, because you might be afraid that the child's going to freak out and think you're a kidnapper, or that the parents will freak out, whatever. Or in the way a biologist would watch animals in the wild, study them, but at a safe distance, as to not disturb them and get involved in whatever it is that they're doing. I'm just saying, there's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd love to come and meet us, but he thinks he'll blow our minds. Wait, where are you going? Yes, we could end the video here, me explaining a concept, and then we're done. But without a single Star Trek reference? Come on. What we need is a plot twist. What if civilizations aren't hiding from each other? What if they're hiding from someone else? Do you know what fits surprisingly well into the Dark Forest theory? The Borg. A predatory species sweeping through the galaxy like a tornado, leaving a path of destruction. In Voyager, Season 6, Episode 7, The Dragon's Teeth, the crew comes across this civilization that's in this kind of suspended animation type thing. The crew wake them and they find out that they're called the Vaadwaur. And they find out that they've been sleeping since 1484, and they do mention the existence of Borg before their short nap. But back in the 15th century, the Borg were nowhere near as advanced as they are by the 24th century. They were still more advanced than we are right now. Meanwhile, we were running around sword fighting over a girl, and it hasn't even occurred to us at the time that women might actually have opinions, especially about things like who they want to spend the rest of their life with. Nah, give her to the one that survives, as if she's a trophy or a sack of potatoes. Now, this might not be the 24th century yet, but it has been 600 years. The Vaadwaur may still be sleeping, but the Borg are no longer just a mild nuisance that control a handful of systems somewhere in the Delta Quadrant. We can now see across decent distances. We have our fancy telescopes and probes that reach as far as outside of our solar system. But nobody's there. Are they hiding from the Borg? Maybe. Or maybe the Borg already has them. Maybe we're lucky because they haven't found us yet. Or maybe they've decided that our tech was underwhelming, that we are an unremarkable species and wouldn't add to their perfection. So they abandoned us in an empty solar system, assimilated everyone else, and just left. Maybe they'll be back for us in the 24th century, when we're no longer basic. Who knows? I'm aware of how outlandish this is. It was just really fun to think about. Bye! No.
Are you hungry?